7 years ago, my daughter-in-law left her sons on my porch and vanished. Today, without warning, she pulled into my driveway in a shiny black car. She stepped out, flawless and smiling, and her first words were, "I've come for my children." 7 years ago, she left her 2 sons, my grandsons, on this very doorstep, cold, confused, dressed in pajamas and clinging to each other like driftwood in a storm. And now, she stood before me in a gleaming black SUV, like royalty visiting peasants. "I've come for my children," she said, just like that, like ordering coffee. My hand tightened on the doorknob so hard it clicked. I had to steady myself because I wasn't sure if I was about to collapse or slap the smug off her surgically smoothed face. The boys were inside finishing dinner. Tim had just spilled gravy on his shirt, and Jake was teasing him, giggling like he hadn't a care in the world. They didn't know what waited at the door. "They're not yours to take," I said before I even thought it. Sarah tilted her head, the way a snake might before striking. "Legally, Evelyn, they are mine, and I will be taking them, one way or another." 7 years. Not a birthday card, not a phone call, nothing. Just a torn-up note left beside a box of cereal on my kitchen counter. "I can't be their mother. Take them. They're yours now." Now she wanted to play mother? The porch light flickered above us. My knees nearly gave out, but I braced myself against the frame. She smelled of expensive perfume and something colder underneath. Her eyes didn't search for the boys. She didn't ask how they were doing. She didn't even pretend to care. "This isn't a discussion," she added, stepping closer, "and if you think I won't take this to court, you clearly don't know who I've become." She turned on her heel, her heels clicking down the steps like gunshots, slid into that black SUV, and rolled the window down one last time. "Pack their things, Evelyn. I'll be back next week, and if they're not ready, I'll come with police." And just like that, she drove off. I closed the door with shaking hands and slid down to the floor. The boys were still laughing in the kitchen. They had no idea their world had just shifted, but mine already had. It was a Tuesday night when my entire world changed. Late August. The house still smelled like cut grass and chicken casserole. I remember the headlights first, sweeping across the front of the house like a searchlight. I thought it might be a delivery driver or a neighbor pulling in by mistake. But then the car stopped, engine idling. When I opened the door, they were just there. Tim was 6. Jake had just turned 4, both in thin pajamas, clutching little backpacks and each other, no jackets, no shoes, and Sarah. She never stepped fully out of the car, just leaned across the passenger seat, her blonde hair a mess, her voice flat. "I'll be back in a few hours," she said. Then she turned her eyes away. Not to the boys, not to me, just away. "Sarah, wait, what's going on?" But she shut the door, drove off. No hug, no instructions, no goodbye. I stood on that porch with 2 children who didn't even understand what was happening. Tim kept whispering, "Is this a sleepover?" Jake wouldn't let go of my leg. I brought them inside. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with the TV muted, holding Sarah's scribbled note in my hand like it might rearrange itself into something sensible. Back later, just a few hours. "Sorry," I called her cell phone, straight to voicemail. I called again and again. By morning, I was leaving messages, calm at first, then begging. By day 3, I contacted the police. They took a report, said they couldn't do much. She was the mother after all, and no custody papers were on file. But they also said something else. "Ma'am, she hasn't been reported missing. No one's looking for her. No one, not even her. I watched those boys every minute. Bathed them, brushed their hair, washed their tiny socks." Jake kept calling me Gamma in a shy voice. Tim wouldn't let me leave the room without asking, "You'll come back, right?" After a week, the school called. Was Sarah planning to enroll Tim in 1st grade? I said yes. I said I was his legal guardian. I said it like I believed it. I didn't know, then, how long I'd be saying it. How many years would pass without a word? And I certainly didn't know that one day she'd come roaring back into our lives like she'd never left. But back then, Back then, I still hoped she'd change. That was the last lie I let myself believe. I found the note on the kitchen counter the next morning, crumpled, torn, written on the back of a water bill. It wasn't folded neatly like someone trying to explain. It was tossed, like trash. A few words in blue ink, barely legible. I can't be their mother. Take them. They're yours now. That was it. Not signed, no instructions, no apology. I stared at it for a long time. My coffee went cold. My hands trembled so hard I nearly tore it in half. The boys were still asleep upstairs. Jake curled up with a stuffed bunny, Tim's little legs hanging off the edge of the bed because he was growing faster than his brother. I sank into the kitchen chair like my bones had turned to dust. They're yours now. How do you even begin to absorb that? I'd already lost my son, their father, just 9 months before. A motorcycle accident on Highway 42. Sarah hadn't even attended the funeral. She claimed she was too emotionally wrecked to face it. But now I wondered if she'd ever felt anything at all. I reread the note again and again, until it stopped looking like words and started looking like a threat, or a dare, or maybe a confession of something too dark for her to say out loud. I took the note and put it in a Ziploc bag. I didn't know why. Maybe because part of me already knew I'd need it one day, that her silence wasn't permanent, just postponed. And I was right. 7 years later, I brought that same note to my lawyer. But back then, I kept it in the freezer behind the peas. I didn't tell anyone, not the neighbors, not even my sister, because I was still trying to protect Sarah. God help me, I thought she might come back. I told the boys she was traveling for work. I made up postcards. I even bought stamps and addressed them in messy handwriting, like a busy mom on the go. Every lie I told was meant to soften the abandonment, but it didn't. You can't lie away the ache of a child waiting at the window every afternoon. That note changed everything. It was her goodbye, her abdication, her signature in absence. I didn't know it then, but that little scrap of paper would one day save all three of us. The first year nearly broke me. Tim wouldn't sleep unless I sat beside his bed. Jake developed a cough that winter, and I sat in the rocking chair every night for 2 weeks, wrapped in a blanket, holding him upright so he could breathe. I learned the sound of his wheezing, better than I ever knew my own heartbeat. We had no money for babysitters or fancy things. I clipped coupons, sold my jewelry. I bought secondhand uniforms from the church swap and taught myself how to patch knees and hem sleeves. Tim wanted to play baseball. The fee was $45. I didn't have it, so I cleaned houses on weekends for 3 months to make sure he got a glove and cleats like the other boys. The first time he hit the ball, he looked at me like I'd built the whole world just for him. He never asked why his mother didn't come to games. Jake was different, quiet, dreamy-eyed. He'd stare at the stars and ask questions no child his age should ask. Why did she leave? Did I do something bad? Do moms stop loving you if you cry too much? No child should wonder that. But he did, and I had no good answers, so I just held him, again and again, until he stopped asking, or maybe just stopped hoping. They started calling me Grandma at first, but somewhere between soccer practices, piano lessons, parent-teacher conferences, and stomach flus, it became Mom. I never asked for that title. I never corrected them either. It came naturally, slowly, like healing, like ownership over a life we were all piecing back together. By year 3, Jake didn't remember what her voice sounded like. By year 4, Tim stopped asking if she'd call. And me? I learned how to be their everything. Not because I wanted to, but because no one else showed up. I went from baking birthday cakes with boxed mixed to sewing Halloween costumes from scratch. I learned how to fix a leaky faucet and how to file school paperwork when the mother's name is blank. We got through. There were still nights I cried after they fell asleep. Guilt, exhaustion, ached out bones. But I never let them see it, because they were already abandoned once. I wasn't going to let that story end the same way again. And for a while I thought we were finally safe. I started to believe that maybe this was our story now, that Sarah was a chapter we had closed. But peace is a fragile thing. And one Tuesday afternoon, as the lasagna baked and Tim hummed at the kitchen table, the past came roaring up my driveway, dressed in black and wearing heels. I froze. The casserole dish slipped from my hands into the sink with a loud clang. Tim looked up. "Who's that?" he asked, already halfway to the window. I didn't answer. Some part of me already knew. Not in my mind, not consciously, but somewhere deep in the bones, I felt it like a storm front rolling in. Something dark. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked slowly to the door. I could see the car through the glass. Black, sleek, shiny, not a scratch on it. The kind of car you don't drive through a rural town unless you want to be noticed. The engine purred like a threat. She got out slowly, like she had all the time in the world. Designer sunglasses, long coat, heels that didn't belong anywhere near gravel, a manila envelope in one hand, phone in the other. Sarah. 7 years, and not a damn word. She looked better than ever. Not a hair out of place, not a hint of regret. Her lips curled up when she saw me. Not kindly, not nervously. It wasn't joy. It wasn't shame. It was entitlement, like she expected gratitude or applause. "Who is that?" Tim asked again. I stepped between him and the window. "No one you need to worry about, sweetheart. Go check on your brother." He obeyed, reluctantly, peeking back over his shoulder like kids do when they sense something isn't right. I opened the door. Slowly. My hands were shaking, and I hated that she could still do that to me. I wanted to slam the door. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I stood tall. And Sarah, that girl, that ghost, took one look at me and said it. Her first words weren't, "I miss them." Not, "Are they okay?" Not even, "Thank you." No. The first thing out of Sarah Mitchell's mouth, after vanishing for nearly a decade, was a threat. Plain, cold, rehearsed. "I want my sons back," she said, tilting her sunglasses down her nose. "And if you don't cooperate, I'll take you to court." She said sons like a fact, like biology was ownership, like they hadn't spent the past 7 years clinging to me during night terrors and Mother's Day assemblies. My blood ran cold. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me, careful not to let her see inside the house, not let the boys see her, not yet. After 7 years of silence, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "You think you can just show up and collect them like luggage?" Sarah smiled, a tight-lipped little smirk, all smugness and lipstick. "You've done a wonderful job, Evelyn. I'm sure this has been rewarding for you. But I'm their mother. It's time they came home." Home? They were home. In there. With me. With their drawings still in the fridge and their backpacks lined up by the back door. "You didn't write? You didn't call. Not one birthday card." I stepped forward, heart pounding. "They thought you were dead. You let them believe that." "I never said I was dead." She shrugged, glancing down at her manicure. "I needed space. I was grieving. I had to heal." 7 years. 7 years of healing, while I scraped together enough to buy cleats and school supplies. While Jake sobbed into my arms, asking if he'd done something wrong. While Tim started locking the door when he peed because he didn't trust anyone not to leave. And now this woman had the gall to stand on my porch and threaten to take them from me. "I've already spoken to an attorney," she added, matter of fact. "You're not their legal guardian. There were never any custody papers, Evelyn. And unless you want this to get ugly, I suggest you cooperate." That word again, cooperate, like I was an employee refusing to file her paperwork. She turned to leave, tossing one last line over her shoulder. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Then she got into that polished car, like she hadn't just cracked our world in half and drove off. I stood there long after the dust settled, because deep down, I knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. I'm Evelyn Carter, and that night, I barely recognized the sound of my own breathing. It was shallow, fast, like I'd just outrun something, but the thing chasing me wasn't done. I waited until the boys were asleep. Jake curled under his Batman blanket, Tim with his headphones in, pretending not to be scared. Then I sat in the dark at the kitchen table. No light, no sound, Just me and the note she left 7 years ago, still sealed in that freezer bag. And suddenly, I saw it so clearly. Sarah wasn't just back. She was on a mission. I opened my laptop with numb fingers, looked up family court, custody law, abandonment. No formal guardianship meant I was vulnerable, and she knew it. The law doesn't always reward love. Sometimes it rewards paperwork. My stomach turned. I had loved those boys like they were born from my own body, and yet some slick lawyer might call me a glorified babysitter. Temporary, convenient, replaceable. I closed the computer and stared at the note again. Take them. They're yours now. Those words weren't just a cry for help. They were a handoff, a legal abandonment. And somewhere in my gut, I knew that would matter. I'd kept it all these years, not out of bitterness, but instinct. And thank God I had. Still, I wasn't ready for court. Not yet. What if the judge believed her? What if she spun a tale about postpartum depression or trauma? What if they saw me, a 63-year-old woman with a modest income and arthritis in her hands, as the past, not the future? The thought made me nauseous. But then I heard Jake's laugh upstairs, a real one, loud and full of life. And Tim's voice followed, teasing, "Shut up, nerd." And, just like that, I found my footing again. She may have given birth to them, but I raised them, and I would not, could not, let her take them back. I wiped my tears, stood up, and pulled the note from its bag. It was time to find a lawyer. But that wasn't all. The next day, I received a pale yellow envelope. No return address. Just my name in block letters, and a thin line of sweat forming at the base of my neck before I even opened it. I already knew what it was. I waited until the boys left for school before I sat down at the dining room table and sliced it open. Petition for custody reinstatement and allegation of unlawful detention of minors. My fingers trembled as I read the first line. The petitioner, Sarah Mitchell, biological mother of minors Jake Mitchell and Timothy Mitchell, asserts that said minors have been held without legal authority by Evelyn Carter. Held, like I was keeping them locked in a basement. The words blurred on the page. Unlawful detention, neglect of legal protocol, violation of parental rights. She wasn't just coming for them. She was painting me as a criminal. I held my breath and kept reading. Dates, allegations, statements about my failure to contact the mother. Her lawyer, some firm out of Nashville, claimed that Sarah had left the boys in my care during a mental health crisis and always intended to resume custody when stable. When stable. 7 years later, and no mention, not a single line about the note she left, the one that said, "They're yours now." No, in this version of her story, she was the misunderstood mother trying to reunite with her children, and I was just an old woman who'd overstayed her welcome. My mouth went dry, my hands went cold, but deep inside, somewhere under the panic and the sting, something else woke up. Resolve. I walked to the freezer, reached behind the peas, pulled out the plastic bag. The note had yellowed, but the ink was still clear, still cruel. That was the day I called Emily Martin. She wasn't cheap. She wasn't warm either. But she listened, and when I slid that note across her desk, something changed in her eyes. "Evelyn," she said, pressing her finger against the sentence that had broken me years ago, "we can save everything." "That's abandonment," she said. Flat. Certain. "Are you sure?" I whispered. My voice cracked. I hated how small it sounded. "It's not exactly notarized." Emily looked up, eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Abandonment doesn't require a lawyer. It requires intent. And this?" She tapped again. "This is intent in ink." I let out a shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I didn't want false hope. I didn't need sympathy. I needed something solid, something Sarah couldn't twist. Emily leaned back in her chair, studying me. "She's banking on one thing, that you never got legal custody, that you're just the grandmother with a good heart and no paperwork." "I was trying to protect the boys," I said quietly, "from the shame of what she did, from thinking they were unwanted. I get that, but now we protect them a different way, through court. She pulled a folder from her desk drawer. We file for de facto custody based on continuous care. You've raised them. You've supported them. That counts, especially with this note. I nodded, even though part of me still didn't feel brave enough, or smart enough, or enough. Emily saw it. She didn't coddle me. She leaned forward and said something better. Evelyn, she underestimated you. That one line hit like a jolt through my spine. Because she had. Sarah thought I'd crumble. She thought I'd roll over and let her walk away with the boys like none of it ever happened. But I wasn't the same woman she left standing on that porch 7 years ago. I was tired, yes, scared, sure, but I was also ready. Will the judge listen to me? I asked. Emily smiled then, just slightly. If you stick to the truth and I do my job right, he'll do more than listen. He'll see her for what she is. She slid the note into a new envelope, labeled it as evidence, and tucked it into her briefcase. Let her bring cameras. Let her bring crocodile tears. We've got her in her own handwriting. I stood to leave. My knees ached, but my back felt straighter. I had someone in my corner now. And Sarah, she had no idea what was coming. The first thing I saw was her face in the local paper. Grieving mother seeks reunion with sons after mental health battle. Grieving mother, my foot. The article made her sound like a war hero. 7 years of recovery from depression and trauma. 7 years of healing, growth, reflection. To the public, I didn't exist. She wasn't reclaiming children. She was reclaiming her life. Emily tossed the paper on my kitchen table and rolled her eyes. She's playing the sympathy card early. Smart. It works on judges sometimes, especially when they've never seen the other side of a person. She's building a story, I muttered, and she's good at it. You're better, Emily said, already pulling up court filings on her iPad, and we've got the receipts. Sarah's official claim painted me as caretaker by convenience. She wrote that after my son's death, she temporarily entrusted the boys to my care while she navigated a private health crisis. She said I blocked communication, refused to return calls, and even moved without notice. All lies. She attached photos, baby pictures. A few from her early years with the boys, as if that proved something. One showed Jake on her lap, barely 3 years old, face blank and confused. The caption read, "My babies, I just want them back." I nearly vomited, but the worst part wasn't the photos or the lies, it was the comments. Online, strangers were praising her. So brave. What a fighter. Every mom deserves a second chance. Nobody knew what she'd done. Nobody saw her taillights disappearing into the night. Nobody heard Tim's tiny voice whispering, "Did we do something wrong?" I kept scrolling until I saw one that made my hands curl into fists. The grandma should be grateful. Most mothers wouldn't come back at all. Grateful? Grateful that she vanished without a trace? Grateful for every doctor's visit, every parent-teacher conference, every night I rocked Jake through his nightmares while she healed on some yoga mat in a high-rise condo? No, not grateful. But I was ready to show the truth, to let the evidence speak louder than her performance. Emily slid a stack of papers across the table. Court dates, filings, declarations. "This is war now," she said. "And Sarah? She's putting on a show." I looked at that headline one more time, then folded the paper in half. In public, Sarah wept. But in private, she was just a snake in heels with a price tag for everything, including her sons. She found me at Maureen's Diner, of all places. No lawyers, no cameras, just me, sitting with a half-empty coffee mug, and her sliding into the booth across from me like this was a casual lunch date. "I don't have time for this," I said flatly. She didn't care. Sarah set her designer bag beside her and looked around, making sure no one was close enough to overhear. "You've made things messier than they needed to be," she said, no emotion in her voice. This could have been simple. I didn't respond. She leaned in like she was about to share a big secret. "So here's what I'm offering. $500,000. Cash. I'll drop the lawsuit. You walk away." She pulled a folded contract from her bag and slid it across the table like we were bartering over livestock. "You get money. I get my boys. We both move on. I stared at her. You mean your boys? The ones you left in pajamas with no shoes? The ones who thought you were dead? Her smile tightened. They're mine. Legally. And let's be honest, Evelyn, you're not getting any younger. You can't keep this up forever. She said it like I was a babysitter who'd overstayed her welcome. I didn't touch the contract. Why now? I asked. Why come back after all this time? She scoffed. Because I didn't realize until recently how valuable they'd become. That shut me up. She caught herself, but not fast enough. I saw it, the truth slipping through her perfect smile. Valuable? I repeated. She tried to backtrack. I meant emotionally. They're my children, Evelyn. No, she didn't. She meant valuable as leverage, as story, as brand. Refuse the offer, she said, standing, and I'll make you look like the bitter old woman who kept a grieving mother from her sons. Trust me, I'm good at that. Then she walked out, coat swinging behind her like a cape. I looked down at the contract. Notarized, precise, ruthless. Sarah didn't come back because she missed them. She came back because she thought they could get her something. What she didn't know was this. You don't threaten a woman who's already lost everything once, not unless you're ready to lose. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, the payoff contract still folded in my purse like a loaded weapon. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. The clock ticked louder than usual. Valuable, she said, like they were objects to be claimed. Like the last 7 years hadn't happened. Sarah hadn't come back to mother them. She came back to own them. I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. Dates, photos, texts, school records, the note she left. Emily had warned me. Sarah would twist facts into fiction. I was going to be ready. Then, a buzz. My phone lit up. Unknown number. One new text. You'll lose them anyway. Prepare yourself. 5 words. No name, no punctuation. But I didn't need a signature. I knew who it was. I should have felt fear, and I did, for 2 minutes. Then I stood, pulled down the fireproof box I hadn't touched in years, and laid everything out. My son's death certificate, the boys', medical and school records, photos, letters, witness statements, and that note, not just proof for the court, proof for the boys, so that one day, if they ever doubted me, they'd know who stayed and who disappeared. The next morning, I stared at my reflection. Gray roots, heavy eyes, a jaw clenched too tight. I didn't look weak. I looked like a woman who had carried someone else's burden for 7 years and was ready to defend it. I picked up the phone and called Emily. Set the date, I said. I'm done being afraid. The benches were full. A little too full. Neighbors, strangers, reporters. I could feel the buzz before I even stepped into the courtroom. The kind that says people aren't here for justice. They're here for drama. Sarah made sure of that. She arrived 10 minutes early, stepping out of a black SUV with tinted windows and a pit crew of lawyers. Her suit was dove gray, fitted like armor, soft enough to suggest grief, sharp enough to signal power. She carried a single tissue in her palm like a prop, one she'd probably practiced with in the mirror. When she saw me, she didn't nod, didn't blink. But she made sure to whisper just loud enough for the nearest bench to hear. All I ever wanted was my baby's back. A woman in the front row sniffled. Emily leaned over. She's playing it perfectly. Let her, I whispered. It's not the only show in town. Sarah had always been good at performance. But on the stand, she became a full-blown actress. She dabbed delicately at her eyes as she spoke, her voice soft and broken in all the right places. I wasn't well after my husband died, she said. I was drowning. I had panic attacks. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and I didn't want the boys to see me like that. That's why I left them with Evelyn, because I trusted her. Trusted me? She didn't even knock when she left them on my porch. Her voice cracked, right on cue. She was supposed to bring them back when I was ready, but she disappeared, changed numbers, moved without telling me. I tried to find them. I really did. Lies. Every one of them. Emily shifted beside me. She leaned over and whispered, We've already filed our evidence to dispute every claim. Stay calm. Sarah wiped away a single tear, then looked at the judge. All I want, All I've ever wanted is to be their mother again." She said it so gently you'd think we were denying her water, not protecting 2 children from the woman who walked out on them. The courtroom was still. A few people nodded. Even Judge Brooks looked thoughtful. Then came her attorney, stepping forward with that smug confidence that always seems to show up with overpriced suits. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, "would you describe your relationship with the boys before their grandmother took over?" She smiled, a sad, wistful little thing. "We were close. Tim used to bring me flowers from the yard. Jake would crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms. They were my life." A perfect pause. "And when I saw them again, they didn't even recognize me. That's what Evelyn did. She erased me." "No, Sarah. You erased yourself. She stole my sons," she added, her voice shaking again. "She turned them against me. I want the court to make this right." Emily's hand went rigid in mine. "That's the move," she whispered. "She's shifting from victim to accusation. She's trying to paint you as the villain." I stayed quiet, because I knew what was coming. Sarah could cry. She could lie. She could pull every trick in her playbook. But I had something she didn't. The truth. The note. And 7 years of love that couldn't be faked in a courtroom. I looked around the gallery, saw faces leaning in, eyes soft with pity. They didn't know her like I did, but they were about to, because next, it was my turn to speak, and I was done playing nice. I walked to the witness stand without a tissue, without a lawyer holding my elbow, and without a single tear ready to fall. I wasn't there to act. I was there to tell the truth. Judge Brooks asked me to state my name. "Evelyn Carter," I said, steady. "Grandmother of Jake and Tim Mitchell. Their full-time caregiver since the night their mother drove off and never came back." The courtroom went quiet. Not heavy quiet, electric quiet. Like everyone felt a storm was about to roll in. I looked out at Sarah. She wouldn't meet my eyes. So I turned back to the judge. She says I stole them. She says I cut her off. But she never called, never wrote, never sent a single birthday card. I wasn't hiding the boys. I was raising them. My voice cracked, but not from weakness, from truth pressing against my chest, begging to be let out. I bathed them. I fed them. I taught them how to ride their bikes and how to tie a tie. I sat with Jake through every fever. I cheered for Tim at every game. I didn't take those boys from her. She gave them to me. Emily stood, then walked over and handed me the note, the one I'd kept in the freezer for 7 years, carefully sealed, yellowed at the corners. I held it up with both hands like it was scripture. "This is what she left on my kitchen counter," I said, "the night she abandoned them." Judge Brooks motioned for the bailiff. Emily submitted it as evidence. The paper was handed to the judge. He adjusted his glasses, read silently for a moment. Then he read it out loud. "I can't be their mother. Take them. They're yours now." A rustle swept through the courtroom like a gust of wind. A reporter dropped her pen. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Sarah was frozen, that pretty courtroom mask starting to crack around the edges. "I didn't do this for thanks," I told the judge. "And I didn't do it to take something from her. I did it because those boys were alone, and someone had to show up." I sat down. My hands were still. Judge Brooks didn't look at Sarah. He didn't need to, because the courtroom had just heard the loudest silence of all, her own words, in her own handwriting, and no performance could compete with that. The judge was reading the note again, quietly to himself this time, mouth set in a straight line. Not angry, just final. Sarah tried to speak again. "I was scared. I was sick. I didn't know what I was saying." "No," I said, loud enough for her to hear. "You knew exactly what you were saying. You just never thought anyone would hold you to it." The judge cleared his throat. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you will have your opportunity for rebuttal. Please sit down." Sarah sat slowly, her hands trembling, but not from sorrow, from losing her grip. Tim and Jake weren't in the courtroom, but in that moment I wished they were. Just to hear someone in power, someone official, say what we'd all known for years, that she chose to leave, that I didn't steal them. That love isn't measured in blood or last names. It's measured in presence, in showing up, every day, especially when it's hard. The judge turned to the clerk. "Submit this as Exhibit A," he said. "It will be considered in final custody deliberations." I leaned back slightly in my chair. Not smug, not victorious, just steady. Emily didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Because now, it wasn't just my word against Sarah's story. It was Sarah against Sarah. She'd handed me the sword. All I did was pick it up. The courtroom exhaled. You could feel the shift. Sympathy had curdled. The applause she thought she'd get? Gone. Replaced by silence and side eyes. And I knew, even before the gavel fell, the tide had turned. The courtroom hadn't made a sound since the note was read. Sarah had gone pale. Not just makeup. Pale, blood-drained, hollow-eyed, exposed. And then she snapped. She stood without permission, voice high and shaking. "That note wasn't what it looked like," she cried out. "It was just a bad day. I wasn't thinking straight. I never meant to leave them forever." The judge raised his hand. "Ms. Mitchell." But she was already spiraling. "I loved those boys. I was hurting." Her voice cracked, then rose higher. "You don't know what it's like to bury your husband." "I was lost. I had no one." She turned to me, pointing like a child blaming a classmate. "She wanted them. She wanted to keep them. She manipulated everything she—" "Enough," Judge Brooks said, voice like a hammer. "Sit down, or I will clear the courtroom." Judge Brooks shuffled his notes, looked to both attorneys, and said, "I'll be making my final ruling tomorrow. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell. Sarah stayed seated, not crying anymore, not shouting, just empty, and I walked out of that courtroom with my spine straighter than it had been in years. Because win or lose, she would never be able to pretend again. The next morning, I stood in front of the courthouse with Emily beside me. Neither of us said much. Inside, the air was different. Less tense, more still. Like the courtroom knew the storm had passed, and now it was time to name the damage. Sarah was already there. Alone this time. No SUV. No entourage. Her hair wasn't styled. Her heels were replaced with flats. She looked like what she truly was. A woman who'd run out of costume changes. She didn't look at me. The judge entered. Papers shuffled. No ceremony. "This court has reviewed all submitted evidence," Judge Brooks began, "and considered the testimony of both parties." Sarah sat forward in her seat. Her fingers were locked together so tightly, her knuckles turned white. I didn't move. The note submitted into evidence clearly demonstrated the petitioner's intention to relinquish responsibility. The judge continued. Combined with 7 years of non-contact and no legal effort to reclaim custody, the court finds that Evelyn Carter has served in the role of primary caregiver, physically, emotionally, and financially, without interruption. Sarah's lip quivered. Her lawyer stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. "The claim of unlawful detention is hereby dismissed. Evelyn Carter acted in the best interest of the children." He paused. "And therefore, permanent legal custody is awarded to Ms. Carter, effective immediately. Furthermore," Sarah gasped, "parental rights of the biological mother, Sarah Mitchell, are hereby terminated." That was it. No grand speeches, no dramatic music. Just a sentence that changed everything. The courtroom didn't erupt. There were no cheers. But there didn't need to be. Silence can feel louder than applause, especially when it means justice has finally been spoken. Sarah stood, fists clenched at her sides. "No," she muttered. "No, you can't. This isn't fair. They're mine. They're mine." Judge Brooks didn't even look up. Sarah's voice cracked once more. "You don't understand. I was going to be better. I am better." But nobody responded. Not her lawyer, not the judge, not even the clerk. Emily gently placed a hand on my arm. I stood slowly. My knees ached, but they held. As I walked past Sarah on my way out, she turned toward me, eyes wild, mouth open like she had one last weapon to throw, but nothing came. She just watched me go. The woman who left her children on a porch had finally lost them, not because of me, but because of herself. And this time, there would be no car waiting to take her away. That night, I tucked the boys into bed like I always did. Jake was already half asleep, arms wrapped around that same old stuffed bear he swore he didn't need anymore. Tim was pretending to scroll on his phone, but I could see the stiffness in his shoulders. He looked up. His voice was barely above a whisper. "She's not coming back, right?" I sat down on the edge of his bed. I brushed the hair from his forehead the way I used to when he was 5. "No, sweetheart," I said. "Sarah left you once. This time, it's forever." He nodded, slowly. And for the first time in weeks, I saw the tension melt from his face. Not relief, exactly, not yet, but something softer, something like trust. "I don't remember her," Jake murmured from across the room. "Not really." "That's okay," I said, turning to him. "You remember who stayed." That night, after they fell asleep, I sat in the living room by myself. The house was still. The courtroom was behind us. The lies were behind us. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. I'd spent years carrying guilt that didn't belong to me, wondering if I'd overstepped, held on too tightly, loved them too hard. But the truth was simple. I didn't step in because I was brave. I stepped in because they were alone. And now, they weren't. In the weeks that followed, I filed every document Emily recommended: birth certificates, school forms, medical records, all with my name now where Sarah's used to be. We celebrated with ice cream and extra sprinkles, not because we were celebrating Sarah's loss, but because we were finally free from her shadow. And when people ask me how I did it, how I stood up to a courtroom, a lie, a woman with money and lawyers and crocodile tears, I tell them the truth. I didn't win because I was strong. I won because I stayed.